I've never been one to believe in monsters or Bigfoot, but one early morning in the summer of 1994, my opinion on that subject changed. I was 15, and my dad and I woke up very early and packed his pickup truck and headed to a lake to go fishing. It was something that my dad and I have been doing every year since I was 8. We drove about 2 hours away and got to the lake. We pushed his little silver boat out onto the water and we hopped on. We drove out into the middle of the lake and we began fishing. I remember that the fish were sleeping that morning because we weren't getting any bites. My dad could tell that I was getting kind of bummed out, so he leaned over, reached into his cooler, and pulled out a beer. He said in a soft voice,
"Don't tell your mom."
And then he handed me a beer. I've never drinking before, so after drinking the beer, I felt a little bit buzzed. My dad chuckled at my goofiness and turned back to continue fishing. I faced the opposite direction and began fishing again as well. It was still dead in the water, so I stopped concentrating on my fishing line and began daydreaming while looking into the water. And then in an instant, my focus was broken. When I looked into the water, I saw a large creature swim past me under the water. The only way I can describe what I saw was it looked like an alligator, but it had red skin and looked like there was an orange glow around it. I jumped back into the boat and told my dad what I just saw. He laughed and said that that's the beer talking. He didn't believe me. But whatever sort of beast it was scared the living hell out of me. I'm 52, and I live in Indiana. I live in a rural area with some land around my house. I live alone with my dog. I was sitting in my house one night at about 11:45 p.m. I had just gotten home from work at 10, and I was watching TV when my dog started barking towards the backyard. I told him to lay down, but he kept barking, which was unusual because she was a very well-trained dog and always sat when I told her to, so I got up to see what she was looking at. I looked through the back door and there was nothing outside. I started heading back to the living room, but then my dog's barking went crazy and she was jumping at the door. I walked back to the door and looked out again, but I still wasn't seeing anything. So I opened the door and went outside. It was hard to see because in rural areas there aren't streetlights, but I did notice something. There was something above my house. It was dark gray and almost completely blended into the night sky. It was very large and round. I was trying to figure out what I was looking at when all at once the lights in my house all went out. I ran back inside and flipped on the light switch in the kitchen, and nothing was there. But my dog walked up next to me and started staring down the dark hallway. She was barking non-stop, but she also had that whimper type of bark too. My heart started pounding as my dog and I stared into the darkness. I slowly reached my left hand up and over to the next light switch. I flicked it up. What I saw was the most unnerving thing I'd ever seen. When the light came on, I saw a lean body with gray silk-like skin standing in my living room. It was snarling at me with its mouth hanging open. It must have had 50 teeth, all different shapes and sizes, and its eyes were a dark green color. I slowly stepped backwards. After I took a few steps back, the creature began stepping towards me. This is when I shouted my dog's name. My dog sprinted past the creature and up to me right as I opened my front door. The creature let out a loud screech, and then my dog and I took off down the street running as fast as we could. We hid behind some bushes while I kept an eye on my house. Within 20 minutes, I saw that gray thing floating in the sky take off. I slowly approached my house after that, and I was relieved to find no one in my house. That was a few years ago, and I haven't encountered anything since. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel like I can sense that gray thing floating above my house. At the time of this story, I was only about 10 years old, but it was a few days before I turned 11, so I was really excited. I had been into collecting older video game systems, so my dad was bringing me to some shady hole-in-the-wall shop that was supposedly selling a Nintendo 64 with the original Super Smash Bros. Game. I had been to this shop once before, and I really didn't like it. It was just a rented basement. It smelled awful. It was cramped, and there were leaking pipes sticking out of the walls. But I really didn't care. I just wanted that Nintendo 64. When we arrived there, my dad decided he didn't want to go inside because he knew the guy that owned the shop, and he wanted to spend the day with me, so he would probably just end up staying in there talking to the guy for the whole day. So I took my $15 and marched down there, ready to get out as soon as I got in. I greeted my dad's friend, and right off the bat, asked where the Nintendo 64 was. He said, "Oh yeah, it's in that back closet over there, on a shelf." If he said that to me nowadays, I would be smart enough to turn around and get out of there. But of course, I was a naive kid, and I really just wanted that game. I opened the closet, which made that squeaking sound, and to my surprise, there was a cardboard box that had Sharpie written on the side of it, in quotes saying N64. It was on a high shelf, so I called the man to help me reach it. When he came in the closet, he closed the door behind him, and I know what you're thinking, but this surprisingly isn't the scary part of the story. I paid the guy my money, and I walked back out to the car. When we got home, I darted up to my room and opened the crusted box. But what I found inside wasn't exactly what I was expecting. Inside of that box was the dry, decaying, mangled corpse of a cat. I screamed the loudest I would ever scream in my life. My dad quickly came up and nearly vomited. The rest of the story is kind of fuzzy because I tried to block this from my memory. This happened a little over a decade ago, but it's safe to say that my dad isn't friends with that creep anymore.